Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another weekly Workshop Wednesday. My name is Victor Verba, and I'm an engineer over here at Verify, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Today, we are joined by my good friend, Mr. Matt Sykes, aka Matty Ice. Matt, how's it going today, buddy?
Just aces, Victor. How you doing, sir?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. So for today's workshop, Matt's going to go ahead and use Verify to show us how we can identify some drop calls or maybe some potentially misconfigured hunt groups. We're going to go ahead and get started with a quick overview of our company and what we do. Then Matt's going to go ahead and help us troubleshoot some dropped calls. We'll pause for some Q&A, answer any questions. During the demonstration, if you have any questions, make sure that you ask them in the bottom right-hand Q&A panel on the bottom right corner of your screen. Then after Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card, so make sure you hang out to see if you have won. So, quick overview of Verify and what we do. We are the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR, UCCX, and Cube analytics, completely customizable dashboards and widgets, remote phone control, change management, as well as DN and DID management. But today, we're going to go ahead and focus in on identifying some dropped calls. Also, for any of you guys looking for a more hands-off experience with Verify, Verify does offer a managed consulting service. This is a service that provides you a dedicated systems engineer to do all the heavy lifting, giving you and your end users a completely hands-off experience. We are basically an extension of your organization. Upgrades, one-on-one training, report, dashboard building, your dedicated Verify systems engineer would have you covered. Your SE is engaged with your team on a one-on-one basis to provide additional consulting, unassisted reporting, dashboarding configurations, as well as system monitoring assistance. So if any of those things sound of any interest to you, please make sure you reach out to your account manager, and let's take a look and see if the ECS offering is right for you guys. So with all that said, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to you and have you take us into the wild.
All right, hello everyone and welcome. This is Matt Sykes with Verify, and as Victor just set the table for me, we're going to cover dropped calls, but mainly calls that are kind of associated around hunt groups and maybe some failures to being handled by some of the agents, et cetera, et cetera. So whether or not they're being dropped or abandoned. So I wanted to start off with on the Verify KB for our UCM CDR data dictionary. I just want to cover very high level what we identify as an abandoned call. So abandoned call, here's our definition. So calls in which the originating party dialed a number and then hung up, ended the call first, mind you, before a successful connection was established. Okay, so that is the Verify description and terminology definition. So let's actually go to the horse's mouth, if you will. So I was reviewing some notes last night and looked at some of the Cisco documentation and just wanted to pull this to the forefront. Let's see what Cisco says about abandoned calls. So we're going to be pretty close in line here with them. Let's see, abandoned calls. Oh, please highlight those again. Here we are. So this is okay. This is mentioning about off hook, on hook. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm mainly concerned about calls that come into a hunt group that are not handled and that are abandoned by the inbound caller. So what the three things within Verify that we identify, well, the main three things I would say that we identify an abandoned call is going to be, now it does make mention of it here, that the date time connect field is going to remain blank. Also, we're going to see a 0-second duration of call duration. But there's one other thing it's leaving out here as well that one of their examples does make mention of here, which is perfect. So this is an internal abandoned call, but extension 2001, the originator of the call or the calling party number, calls over to 2309, but they hang up first. They hang up before the call is even answered by 2309. So we certainly see the 0 duration in here. I definitely can guarantee you that the date time connect field in the raw CDR for that record is also blank. But also what we see here is the originating cause code value. Code 16. Now, what is code 16? Code 16 is pretty important because it is the normal call clearing cause code. And I actually have their cause code sheet up here as well. So their termination cause codes, no error, very normal, but 16 is what I'm looking for. Normal call clearing. Now, what does exactly this mean? And why is it important? Good question. I'm so glad you asked. Normal call clearing is going to be at the very end of a call. It's going to signify exactly what party of the call actually terminated at the end of the call, as our definition had mentioned a couple moments ago. So when we see this call code 16, normal call clearing, that will denote that that is the party that hung up the phone. or terminated that phone call. So we're going to be chasing that around a little bit through some of my data examples here, but also let's actually now in the CDR interpretation within Verify, let's actually look at an example of an abandoned call and how we utilize those three pieces, in the date time connect being blank, call duration being 0, as well as the normal call clearing cause code is going to fall underneath the originating cause code or the inbound caller. So I'm going to jump down to some of my hunt group examples on this dashboard that I showcase quite frequently. So we can see here the service hunt group received 200 plus calls during the previous week. See one abandoned call. That's the guy I kind of want to focus on for your learning curve here. So I've kind of replicated a report to give me the exact same results, the 202 plus. User handlement as well, but it's the abandoned call that I'm after to show you that representation. So here's the one underneath Donna Brown, and I believe it's down here. Let me just find that code. Here it is, abandoned. So there should be a cradle to grave sequencing with it. So there's definitely, for this call record, there is at least three, well, there are 3 call legs that are also related to it. So I can click on the link and jump down underneath the sequence section for that call and actually see this call from inception to termination, let's say. So we can see this external caller calls in, hits the Unity handler here. They press an option to be routed to the maintenance hunt group. It gets passed over the maintenance hunt group. However, we see a user busy code on the on the terminating cause code side. So the user is busy. The user or users are busy at the moment. It looks like it parks the call for a moment, utilizing native call queuing. Now I'm not going to get into that too much, but definitely at the very end, then we do see a 0 duration call here. We see the normal call clearing, and we have flagged this. Let me slide over. We have flagged it as an abandoned call type. So now, once again, the 3 pieces that are making this up is going to be the date time connect at the very top here, which is going to be blank, as we can see. So that's 1 for 1. Call duration, column E, I believe. Column E, so that's going to be 0. Okay, so I'm 2 for 2. So date time origination, or excuse me, date time connect being blank, call duration being 0, and the cause code of 16, or normal call clearing cause code, falls on the originating cause code side. So with this falling on there, those 3 pieces, I mean, this is tied, the originating cause code is always tied back to the original caller of the call. So the calling party number, the inbound caller that was calling over. So we see no daytime connect, we see 0 call duration, we see normal call clearing. We're going to flag that as an abandoned call within Verify. Now, that I just want to kind of get out of the way. That is what we're going to recognize as abandonment, but there are other call scenarios where calls are being dropped or maybe somewhat quote unquote abandoned by the system where we're not going to call them abandoned. And that's exactly what we're going to run through right now. So I've got some examples from a hunt group that I was keying off of. I actually have 3 different hunt groups to key off of, but let's just take a quick look at this one that I'm keying off of. So anything that's being presented to this hunt group of 6860, there's obviously quite a few hundred calls that are presented to it. Unfortunately, see out of this 523 calls, I definitely see almost 200 of them are abandoned, and 120 of them also go to voicemail. So that's the lion's share of all the call traffic coming into this one hunt group that unfortunately is not being serviced by an agent off of the line group list. So we can certainly kind of jump through some of these sequences, and we will right now, because there's another code that I do want to make mention that is of paramount importance that I think is somewhat common, but it needs to be identified or maybe just kind of looked after once in a blue moon by the administrators of the environment. So the code I'm looking for, and once again, we're going to be keying off of originating and terminating cause codes. So we're going to be looking at that very intently. Let me see, I'm sure I've got plenty of them in here. Here we go, perfect one. So sequence 63 here, we can see that caller external caller called into 6603, routed over to the Unity handler here, that's 6600. I can see the terminating device name, which is because it's CUC, and I'm familiar with this data, so I do know that's their handler there. They select an option there, so we can see the call forward all on that Unity piece. It gets presented to this hunt group of 6860. Now, however, as we can see, on the terminating cause code, we see the no answer from user. Now, once again, this is, I wouldn't say a common code, but it's definitely a code that you should be aware of. And if it's happening with a lot of regularity, maybe be concerned about. Definitely this hunt group should be concerned about it. Because we can see here, this call was presented to the hunt. There was no answer from user alerted. And then we actually see the call gets routed immediately then down to Unity. So for them to leave a voice message or whatever. We definitely see there's a minute plus of talk time while they're connected to Unity. And then we do see, once again, the normal call clearing, denoting that's the side of the call that hung up the phone, is on the originating cause code side. Once again, this ties back all the way to the calling party number or the originator of the call. So in this hunt group here, I'm seeing, unfortunately, an overwhelming amount of these no answer from users, and then calls being routed right over to Unity immediately, and then whether or not they're just bailing off immediately or not, they're still being connected to Unity, so we're not going to classify these as abandoned calls. We definitely are gauging them as voicemail calls that terminated in Unity, so that's definitely one thing to be aware of. So that's definitely part of the, I believe was it 119 calls that I saw that went to voicemail? This is certainly one of them. But definitely there's other instances where maybe, well, here's one right here, where we're seeing consecutive no answer from users. We see the call, okay, this is a transfer from 7,000 from Marissa over to this this hunt group here. We see it rings actually to another hunt group, probably a rollover failure, but once again, we're getting no answer from user on that one as well. And then it goes down to Unity, and after 6 seconds, the inbound caller says, I'm done. We can denote that by the normal call clearing cause code on the originating side, and that ties back once again to the originator of the call. So that's one thing to be maybe aware of. Definitely, I've built some things in a dashboard that we can kind of review here real quickly based off of this one hunt group. Now I've got all three built out here, but we really only need to look at the top one, or the stuff in green. So for those 500 some odd calls, now this is certainly 523 call legs that were routed to the 6860 hunt. Truly, it's really only about 404 because there's definitely, just like we were looking at that scenario a moment ago, where we're seeing, maybe not that one, this guy right here, where we're seeing calls that are presented to the hunt, no answer from user, but then represented again to the same DN, but rolling over to Unity immediately. So these are kind of being double counted, but we definitely have the luxury of using the total sequence count, which is going to give us the specific and verified, no pun intended, call count that was presented to this hunt group. But once again, we see the 197 were abandoned, not being handled by an agent, and then the person said enough is enough and hung up before Unity engaged. But also people that hung out and waited for Unity to engage, there were at least 119 of them. Now, whether or not there was a voice message left, we're not necessarily aware of that, but we definitely know those calls terminated in Unity. So out of 404 calls, this is 300 plus that are unfortunately not being handled at all. Okay, but another thing that I've kind of circled around is that in these calls, and I'll just jump back to that report, that we're seeing with this no answer from user alerted. Now, once again, this is something to kind of be mindful of if it's happening with a lot of regularity. So I'm not kind of, I am in the widget on my dashboard here, actually using the terminating cause code field to locate and pin down the no answer from user alerted code. How often is that happening over all of these calls? Well, unfortunately, it seems to be quite a few. So this actually just happens to match the voicemail call count. This is telling me that 119 times that it received that no answer from user and then moved the call on down to Unity as well. So those are one for one. But also maybe, okay, so they didn't answer at the hunt, no user available, rolled to Unity, and then they hung up while they were connected to Unity, the inbound caller that is. But there's some other oddities that we can certainly see where maybe the system is dropping the call. Now, I've also found last night in my kind of review of all this data here that 8 of these 119 calls actually were dropped by Unity themselves. So instead of, unless I can find one quickly enough. So the way I'm able to find that is, once again, we're going to lean on this normal call clearing cause code. Once again, denoting that that is the party that hung up the phone call. Now, I don't know if I'm able to find it quickly enough. If not, I'm not going to dig around for it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, a great data exercise example right here that we'll play with in the sandbox. I'm going to want to find these 8 calls. I want to know what these 8 calls are and validate them and just kind of show you how I found them and how I built them out instead of taking you perusing through all that data like I did last night. So within this widget, I'm keying off of a handful of different things. Originating called party number of 6860, that is the Hunt Pilot DN. Obviously, the reason I don't, that we here at Verify normally don't use the Hunt Pilot DN as a primary filter, even though we do have it, is because calls that are abandoned or rolled to voicemail do not get stamped in the Hunt Pilot DN with the pilot number. So certainly original called party number is kind of a catch-all for you. So we're using that, pairing that with the terminating cause code of normal call clearing on the would be the internal side for the data representations for those calls that are actually hitting Unity. But I want to see when the system is actually hanging up on them. So that's why I'm looking and leaning on the terminating cause code side, because the inbound caller, he's all part of the originating side. He's not part of the terminating side. The terminating side is going to be in-house. So utilizing that code here, I know that this call is going to end at 6860. And I've also even baked on an additional redirect code reason here of call forward, no answer. I found those while going through my data examples yesterday. So let's actually replicate this real briefly. And my time period I used was current week. Okay, so for these 8 calls that we see that were dropped here at Unity, I'm going to validate them for you right now. So we're going to go into, I've got my sandbox open here, or the analytics reporting module will default you into the history section. Once again, I call this the sandbox because I can search anything 6-7 different ways to Sunday. So I'm just going to mirror that exact filtering I had on that widget, which was original called party number equaling 6860, keying off of current week. Okay. I was keying off of the terminating cause code as well. Just an FYI, dynamic keyword searches baked into every dropdown within Verify. So this one on the terminating cause code, once again, I want to see the normal call clearing on the inside of the house on those calls that aren't being handled. And then the last code I was using was a redirection reason. And it was no answer, call forward, no answer, I think. No answer. Once again, dynamic keyword searches, no call forward, no answer. The match all criteria toggle is going to and all three of these pieces together. So for the current week, this should pull back to me the 8 calls that I actually have represented in this widget here. 8 of these 119 calls that had no answer from user alerted, that actually rolled down to Unity, but Unity dumped them out and dropped those calls. So let me just see if I can find that export. I haven't exported it yet. Okay, but here they are. Here are those 8 calls mirroring the exact same filters I have in my dashboard widget. So that's the terminating cause code of normal call clearing to the hunt of 6860 on the original call party number, and also the last redirect reason. So I have those 8 calls. Let's actually export them real quickly just with the cradle to grave logic turned on so that we can actually see all the ebbs and flows of these calls without any additional suppression. So I'll just go ahead and run this. This will be for these 8 calls, and then it will also include any additional call records that were associated with these 8. So we can actually kind of see, and maybe do a stare and compare versus some of the calls where the inbound caller is bailing out when they're connected to Unity, or others where these 8 right here, where we're actually seeing Unity dumps them. Let me zoom into 150. So once again, for these 8 calls, those are my filters here in the ad hoc search. All this is great. I'm mainly concerned with the cradle to grave logic. So let's scroll over here to the related calls, click on that link, jump down to these. Now these should be, all 8 of these should have the kind of the same sequencing here. We see an external inbound caller calls into the Unity handler, gets selects an option there, gets routed over the 6860 hunt. Once again, 0 duration, no answer from user that we're seeing. Certainly we're extrapolating those in the widgets as well. So 119 of those, certainly, obviously, we found, but it's the 8 that we're kind of chasing right now at the moment. And of course, it resizes on me. So we see it there, but what's bolded in orange is definitely what I want to pick off, and what looks like it's Unity dumping the call. So once again, we see that the call is presented to the hunt group. There's no answer from user alerted, whether or not that's native call queuing, or there's no agents that are logged into that hunt, or everyone's on lunch. Certainly, there was nobody available to answer that call after quite a significant amount of ring time, let's say. But then we see the call then obviously gets call forwarded down over to Unity to the 6000, excuse me. And obviously we can represent that with or identify that with the terminating device name beginning with the CUC, as well as I'm familiar with this data set here, so I know it's a Unity messaging system. But once again, we see the normal call clearing here on the terminating side. So primarily, you're going to see that on the originating side where it's the inbound caller said, enough is enough, I'm done waiting and hanging up. Now this one's seeing this is once again, code 16, normal call clearing, very powerful because this tells us that this is actually who hung up the call. So this is being in the terminating cause code field. It's tied to the terminating device name. Well, in this instance, it's Unity. So this actually tells me there that after a minute and 18 seconds while connected, whether it's a timer or something like that, but that would be maybe 78 seconds, kind of an odd value on a timer, but definitely that Unity is disconnecting this call. So that's definitely maybe the managers or supervisors are unaware of that, but definitely there's 8 that are in this this export that I have right here that that called into the hunt, presented the hunt. We see the no answer from user, and then instead of the user hanging up while waiting, in Unity, maybe this one's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Maybe they're pressing additional options. Maybe they're waiting to be serviced again. But definitely Unity normal call clearing on the terminating side, tied to the terminating device name, is the one that is is dropping those calls. So definitely those are things that we're going to want to be aware of. So in addition, I'll just jump back to that same data set of the frequency and regularity of how many calls are actually being presented to the hunt where we're seeing the no answer from user code. Now that's definitely something that would raise an eyebrow and that the managers and supervisors maybe want to be aware of, so they can make certain that the team is properly staffed, or the configurations for the hunt line for the hunt pilot has enough lines DNs built in it, so the servicing for the external inbound callers is well maintained. and there's not a lot of abandonment, and there's not a lot of no answer from users, or even the option for Unity to go ahead and drop those calls after X amount of time. But definitely there's quite, in this report here, I've got, what was it, 400 some odd calls that were presented. I had 119 of them that went to voicemail, but also those same 119 also had the no answer from user. So that's why this sequence here, or many of these that you'll see as I'm combing through, have two bolded orange rows within them. The middle leg here is certainly the presentation to the hunt where the no answer from user code is tripped, and then the call is shoved over to Unity. And then normally 9 times out of 10, it seems here, they are the external inbound caller is hang up while connected to Unity. This one being 9 seconds. But obviously this quick example here, very easy to kind of build this around and ascertain whether or not actually, if Unity is dumping these calls on you and not maybe giving this caller a secondary chance to be maybe round robin or represented as hunt group, for instance, if the hunt group staff is maybe a little taxed, let's say. So we definitely have those options there. Some other examples that I have here, let me see, what else do I have here? Now, this is one of my more internal hunts here on my Verify system here. But once again, we can see the same methodology here. Now, this one is a user busy, parking lot devices. There's definitely going to be some no answers. Let's go find some. Here we go. Same example that we were seeing with that other data set as well. This one a little lengthier, but once again, the power behind the the Verify cradle to grave sequencing, we can read this top down, see every ebb and flow of this call. Coming into a handler, going to contact center, being picked by one of the agents from contact center, like you're in the wrong place, transfer that call over to the hunt group. This is pretty much a zero duration system connect leg here. But then we can see that external caller presented to that hunt once again, but then once again, here we are, no answer from user alerted. So nobody was available to answer that call as it came in. Maybe native call queuing needs to be turned on for this, so there's actually a little buffer for the staff on the hunt group. But once again, the same example here, we're seeing the call goes to Unity. This one happens to be 8,000 per CUC Verify. But once again, we see the normal call clearing on the originating cause code side. It should be originating cause code. That once again ties all the way back to the calling party number, so that we'll denote code 16 here signifies that after 51 seconds connected to Unity, this inbound caller said enough is enough and hung up. And we can see some other things with native call queuing, dequeuing, secondary destinations, no agents logged in. We have a webinar on some of that stuff in a couple of weeks, so I'll save that for Mike. But definitely a lot of those examples where we see data at hunt groups being presented to not being the best user experience, for instance. Nobody wants to be, if they hung up and called right back, just to not have that same situation kind of happening again and again. As well as getting shoved over to Unity with no additional options. But definitely getting dropped out of Unity caused by Unity is definitely something that may be a tad alarming for the UC admin team as well. So one last example I think I will showcase with regards to potential hunt group data. Now here's one from another data set as well. Now this one I siloed and circled in on one specific call record that I just wanted to showcase here. So now this one is a little odd because this one is a let's see here. It is not flagged in as abandoned call. It is missing daytime connect. It has 0 call duration, so it's 2 for 2, but it's not 3 for 3. Why is it not 3 for 3? Because the originating cause code that's tied to the inbound dialer is not normal call clearing, or code 16. So that's why that will not be flagged as an abandoned call within Verify. However, turning on the cradle to grave logic, even just on this one leg here, I can just look down below and see exactly what this call was about. Now, certainly this might have been too early in the day. Maybe there was maybe the business is closed, for instance. But definitely what we can read from the data exercise here is this external number called into this, looks like a contact center script or a handler of some nature. So maybe some time of day routing, et cetera, et cetera. But they did route the call to a hunt pilot. So they routed the call down to this 8219200. And it looks like it rolled over to an IVR. But at that moment here, we see no other call legs or next steps of this call sequencing. We don't see a normal call clearing cause code here. And once, like I said earlier, normally 9 times out of 10 or 99 out of 100, normal call clearing is going to be on the very last leg in a cradle to grave sequence within Verify. Now, seeing this here where it doesn't have that tertiary leg, so we can actually identify that, this kind of tells me that the system just gave this caller the boot or just disconnected and dropped this call. So there's no next steps. Maybe this is something that's configured this way, outside of normal business hours, but definitely something to be aware of. And once again, you can still lean on that terminating cause code equaling the no answer from user alerted to identify this and catch this, whether or not you want to catch it, in an ad hoc search within the history section here, or whether or not you want to build out a corresponding widget to also identify that. So one other thing I did build in here as well, I will make mention of, is I threw in a grouping statistics style widget here based off of this information as well for that one hunt group that we were playing with earlier. But I wanted to know some of the abnormal codes that we're seeing on calls that are coming into the hunt. So a quick example here, I'm just going to edit this real briefly, utilizing a lot of the same filters that I have. So original called party number or calls being presented to that 6860 and the terminating cause code. Now I didn't funnel this down to just specifically no answer from user, although I could have certainly. What I did here was I picked the top 3 normal cause code scenarios, which are going to be normal call clearing, no error, and call split. I flipped a Boolean on them by clicking the is to an is not to go ahead and illuminate any other cause codes that are on the terminating side that could be of some ambiguity or some abnormalcy that we want to be identifying. So covering the same time frame, which was the current week. So that's how I was able to build that out, excuse me. And I also told the widget to group it, its primary grouping type by the terminating cause code. So once again, that's those 119. We see them right there. If we need to build out detailed widgets or even run kind of quick checks in the history section to see all those 119, certainly we may if we wanted to. Okay. So the last I think I have to showcase on that is going to be some of the hunt group configurations within the call manager system itself. So let's go take a quick peek at that. So I do have my call manager here. It hasn't logged me out, thank goodness. Within the CDM admin page here, if I go underneath call routing and go underneath the route hunt option, but drill into the hunt pilot. Now, this is not going to match my my data set examples that we just kind of plowed through a moment ago, but I think everyone will kind of get the interpretation here. So looking at the hunt pilot configuration within Call Manager here, obviously looking at the definitions and the kind of the base configurables for it, but also what's happening with the forwardings or any message queuing. So are there forwards for the no answer user alerted that it needs to forward it to a secondary destination? Does it need to forward it to maybe a secondary hunt group to handle that overflow? Definitely see plenty of those out in the field. Or is there forwarding going on when the hunt is busy? Should those be forwarding, or are they set for default to not forward anything and then eventually just go ahead and terminate that call? Or are they being routed once again to a secondary or an external third party answering service, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. But also when it comes to native call queuing, is queuing turned on this hunt? And you'll certainly be able to see that within the verified data examples as well. If I have one here. Let's see here. I'm not gonna fish for it right now. But what we actually we do have it. Find it. Word native. Of course not. All right, so sorry about that. So, but with the queuing options, if the queuing options are turned on, maybe there's some timers that are set maybe too low, not giving the staff enough time to to finish that last call and pick up a new call that's actually waiting in the native call queuing for them. Because as we can see here, some of the defaults are just disconnect the call. It's not automatically going to route it to a secondary destination. Is there a timing issue that we need to take a look at? Maybe when no hunt members answer or logged in or registered. These are the defaults: disconnect, disconnect, disconnect. Are there routing options for additional destinations with some timers here that you may want to take a secondary look at that are definitely or could be certainly impacting the performance of calls into your hunt group. Also, I want to add into that as well. Another thing to look at underneath the provisioning of the hunt pilot stuff is maybe the line group. So the line group that is associated, for instance, with that hunt pilot. So I'll pick on this line group for the ninjas again for that hunt. And then also in here, looking at all the line groups, all the DNs that are part of this line group. Now, are all these DNs, are they still valid? Maybe there are some DNs in here or some devices that are in here that are unregistered or are no longer valid. And there needs to be some cleanup or some attention by the UC admin team to take a look at this to get this solidified more concretely. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of things that we can look at with that. And even kind of review as well. So even with that, the example that I had earlier when looking at widgets, kind of building out how many calls are coming into a hunt group over whatever time frame broken down by whichever metric on the x-axis, but also the abandonment, the voicemail rate, and also the abnormalities that are happening. Is Unity dropping calls? Is something else? Are we not seeing the normal call clearing cause code on the very end? Is the system dropping those calls quite frequently? We can certainly see those, and even to build this stuff out into a report if we needed to. So I have this kind of replicated here as well. So those same counts that we've just kind of been covering here. So the 523, the 404, and then 119 calls that went to voicemail, but that also then had that no answer from user code on them, but also then the 8 that I also had in that other widget that we're identifying in these cradle to grave search sets summaries here, all the 8 that actually dumped off or were dumped off by Unity. So certainly we can build these out into analytic reports. We can build them in dashboard widgets for high-level summarization, as these guys are always refreshing. Or you can certainly just hop right into the sandbox or into the analytics history search section and validate calls that are traversing your hunt group, and then just export that very simplistically with maybe just the one filter using that, so you can see everything. And then certainly you can comb through the cradle to grave sequences and see all the ebbs and flows and maybe any abnormalities that may just kind of jump off the screen at you. Once again, this no answer from user alerted code is definitely something to be mindful of for calls that are not being handled at the hunt group level. So I think with all that said, Victor, do we have any questions from the audience today?
Excellent job, as always, Matt. Nothing is worse than sitting in a queue for 10 minutes and all of a sudden getting hung up on.
Right?
So, excellent job. Thanks for bringing that to light and showing us how we can report on that. We did have one question come in.
Oh, please.
The question was asking about what version of Verify you're running there.
Someone caught that, huh?
You can't slip anything past our crew.
I get you. So what I was demoing everything from was our current GA from one of my personal labs here. So our current GA is release 12.4.3. That is the current GA as of today. The other lab I was tapping into actually does have our beta on it, which is Verify 13.0 EFT1, which once again we are in beta mode for that right now. So it is not available for everyone, but if you are interested in all the new bells and whistles, and there are quite a few in that EFT beta release, certainly let us know and we will get that handled for you. Outside of that, the 13.0 GA does go out, I want to say, end of August. So stay tuned for that, and there's a lot of content that we're going to be covering for that. So stay tuned.
Excellent job, Matt. Let me go ahead and steal the ball back from you here.
Mm-hmm.
And if, like Matt had said, if you guys have any questions about the GA release, maybe you're interested in being part of the beta. If you have not already, make sure you pop over to planetverify.com. You can connect with your peers, expand your knowledge of all things Verify, and learn a little bit more about Matt. So if you pop over to planetverify.com, you can go ahead over to our podcast channel over there and learn a little bit about some of the folks over here, Matt being one of those as well. We are in beta for 13, so you can sign up for a beta release if you're interested in some of the new features. Definitely feel free to take a look at some of our past webinars where we cover all the features in 13 beta. Some of the high-level features are database archiving, UCCX audible alerting for any of our UCCX folks out there. That's a great addition, as well as Cube event versus sequence reporting. Also, again, a new addition for any of our Cube folks out there. So there's more involved in 13 beta. So if you guys are interested, again, make sure you head over to planetverify.com. You can sign up for our beta program there, and you can also schedule and install directly from the channel there or from the beta group. So now, for the moment that you've all been waiting for, the winner of this week's workshop is Matt Kessler. Matt, congratulations. We will go ahead and have your account manager reach out to you and send you that Amazon gift card. Very much appreciate you hanging out. And don't miss out on next week's webinar, as, again, our friend Matt over here talks a little bit about how to report those answer and abandonment rates as calls traverse through your call handlers. He did touch on call handlers a little bit, and it's a big part of just about everybody's organization out there. So understanding how those guys are being used, but also understanding how those calls are being answered and or abandoned off of some of those call handlers is important. So make sure you join us next week, August 3rd, as Matt kind of walks you through how to report on some of those summary metrics. With all that said, again, thank you everybody for hanging out with us, and have yourselves a great week.
Thank you all. Take care.